Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Don't forget to hit the bell. Let's dive into the thrilling story. The ship that never had a crew. Story begins as the stars were quiet that night, their usual twinkle dimmed by the shadow of the massive ship that hung in orbit around Earth. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, silver, and completely silent. No lights, no engines, no signs of life. Just a giant, unmoving hulk in the sky. Scientists called it the Wanderer, but to the people of Earth, it was a mystery that sent shivers down their spines. No one knew where it came from. One day it wasn't there. The next, it was as if it had always been. Governments scrambled to figure out what it was, but every attempt to communicate with it failed. Drones sent to investigate disappeared without a trace. Satellites that got too close stopped working. It was a puzzle, and puzzles have a way of making people nervous. That's when Captain Sarah Mitchell got the call. Sarah was one of the best pilots in the United States Space Force. She had flown missions to Mars, repaired satellites in deep space, and even survived a crash landing on the moon. But this was different. Captain Mitchell, the voice on the other end of the line, said, "We need you to lead a team to investigate the Wanderer. You'll be the first humans to board it." Sarah's heart raced as she stared at the image of the ship on her screen. It was beautiful in a strange, eerie way. Its smooth, silver surface reflected the light of the sun, making it look almost like a mirror floating in space. But something about it made her skin crawl. "Understood," she said, her voice steady. "Who's on my team?" "You'll meet them at the launch site." "Good luck, Captain." The line went dead, and Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had a feeling this mission was going to change everything. The launch site was buzzing with activity when Sarah arrived. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers moved around like ants, preparing for the mission. Sarah spotted her team immediately. 3 people standing near the spacecraft, their faces a mix of excitement and nerves. The first was Dr. Alex Carter, a brilliant astrophysicist with a reputation for solving impossible problems. He was tall and thin, with messy brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Next was Lieutenant Emma Reyes, a tough-as-nails engineer who could fix anything with a wrench and a roll of duct tape. She had short black hair, a no-nonsense attitude, and a tattoo of a rocket on her arm. Last was Private Jake Thompson, a young soldier with a knack for technology and a love for sci-fi movies. He was the youngest on the team, but his quick thinking had saved more than one mission. "Captain Mitchell," Alex said, shaking her hand. "I've been studying the Wanderer for weeks. There's something strange about it." "Strange how?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. Alex hesitated, then said, "It's like it's alive. The way it moves, the way it reacts to our probes. It's not just a ship. It's something else." Sarah's stomach churned, but she pushed the feeling aside. "We'll figure it out. Let's get to work." The spacecraft shuddered as it entered orbit, the Wanderer looming ahead like a silent giant. Sarah's hands gripped the controls tightly, her eyes fixed on the ship's smooth, silver surface. "No signs of life," Emma said, scanning the data on her screen. "No heat signatures, no energy readings. Nothing." "That's impossible," Alex muttered, adjusting his glasses. "A ship that size should have some kind of power source." "Maybe it's dead," Jake suggested, his voice tinged with nervous excitement. "Like a ghost ship." Sarah didn't answer. She was too focused on the task at hand. "Prepare for docking," she said, her voice calm but firm. The spacecraft connected with the Wanderer with a soft thud, and the team suited up in silence. As they stepped into the airlock, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The door to the Wanderer slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark, empty corridor. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. "This is creepy," Jake said, his voice echoing in the silence. "Stay close," Sarah said, leading the way. "And keep your eyes open." The corridor of the Wanderer stretched ahead, its smooth, metallic walls glowing faintly with a soft blue light. The air was cold and still, and the only sound was the faint hum of the team's boots against the floor. Sarah led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness as she scanned their surroundings. "This place gives me the creeps," Jake muttered, his voice low. He adjusted the strap of his equipment pack, his eyes darting around nervously. It's like something out of a horror movie. Focus, Thompson, Emma said, her tone sharp but not unkind. She held a scanner in one hand, its screen flickering with data. No energy readings, no life signs, but the walls are emitting some kind of low-level radiation. It's not harmful, but it's strange. Alex adjusted his glasses, his eyes wide with curiosity as he studied the symbols on the walls. These markings, they're not just random. They're a language, a really old one. Sarah paused, shining her light on the symbols. They were intricate, almost like hieroglyphs, but with a futuristic twist. Can you read them? Alex shook his head. Not yet, but if we can find a data terminal or something, I might be able to decode them. The team moved deeper into the ship, the corridor widening into a massive chamber. The walls here were covered in Morse symbols, and at the center of the room was a pedestal, its surface smooth and glowing faintly. On top of it sat a small, glowing orb, its light pulsing softly like a heartbeat. What is that? Emma asked, her voice filled with awe. Alex stepped forward, his eyes wide with excitement. It's a data core. If we can access it, we might be able to figure out what this ship is. Sarah's stomach churned as she watched Alex reach for the orb. Something about it felt wrong. Be careful, she said, her voice tense. Alex hesitated, then nodded. I will. As his fingers touched the orb, the room suddenly came to life. The symbols on the walls flared brightly, and a holographic image appeared in the air, a map of the galaxy, with Earth marked in bright red. What does this mean? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them began to shake, and the walls of the chamber started to close in. We need to get out of here, Jake shouted, his voice filled with panic. But Sarah's eyes were fixed on the holographic map. Not yet. There's something here. Something important. The team worked quickly, decoding the symbols and piecing together the map. As they did, a hidden message began to emerge, a warning. Asterisk, the Wanderer is not a ship. It is a prison. Asterisk, a prison. Emma asked, her voice filled with disbelief. For what? Before anyone could answer, the ground shook violently, and the walls of the chamber began to collapse. The team sprinted back to the airlock, their hearts pounding. As they reached the spacecraft, Sarah looked back at the Wanderer, her mind racing. What were they keeping locked away? And what would happen if it got out? The spacecraft shuddered as it detached from the Wanderer, the massive ship looming behind them like a silent predator. Sarah's hands gripped the controls tightly, her eyes fixed on the glowing orb they had taken from the chamber. The team sat in tense silence, their breaths coming in short gasps as they processed what had just happened. A prison, Emma muttered, her voice low and disbelieving. She stared at the orb in Alex's hands, its soft glow casting eerie shadows on her face. What kind of prison? And what's inside it? Alex adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling slightly as he examined the orb. I don't know yet, but this thing, it's a data core. If we can access it, we might be able to find out. Jake leaned forward, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. You mean there's something locked up in that ship? Something bad enough that they needed a whole spaceship to contain it. Sarah's stomach churned as she glanced back at the Wanderer through the spacecraft's window. Its smooth, silver surface reflected the light of the sun, making it look almost beautiful. But now, knowing what they did, it felt more like a tomb. We need to get this back to Earth, Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. If the Wanderer is a prison, we need to know what's inside, and we need to know why it's here. The team worked quickly, setting up a makeshift workstation in the spacecraft's cabin. Alex connected the orb to a portable terminal, his fingers flying over the keys as he tried to access its data. The orb's glow intensified, and the terminal's screen flickered to life, displaying lines of strange symbols. It's the same language as the symbols on the walls, Alex said, his voice filled with excitement. If I can just... Before he could finish, the orb flared brightly, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It was a star map, but unlike any they had ever seen. The stars were arranged in strange patterns, and a single point glowed brightly. Earth. What is that? Emma asked, her voice filled with awe. Alex's eyes widened as he studied the map. It's a warning. The Wanderer wasn't just a prison. It was a trap. A trap for what? Jake asked, his voice trembling. Before Alex could answer, the spacecraft's alarms blared, and the control panel lit up with warning lights. Sarah's hands flew over the controls, her heart racing as she tried to stabilize the ship. What's happening? Emma shouted, her voice sharp with panic. The Wanderer, Sarah said, her voice tight. It's moving. The team turned to look out the window, their breaths catching in their throats. The Wanderer's smooth surface was shifting, its metallic walls rippling like liquid. The ship began to move, its massive form turning toward them with terrifying speed. It's alive, Jake whispered, his voice filled with awe. And it's coming after us, Emma said, her voice sharp with panic. Sarah's heart raced as she pushed the engines to their limit, the spacecraft shooting through the stars with the Wanderer close behind. The spacecraft shuddered as Sarah pushed the engines to their limit, the stars outside the window blurring into streaks of light. Behind them, the Wanderer loomed like a silent predator, its smooth, silver surface rippling as it moved with terrifying speed. It's gaining on us, Jake shouted, his voice sharp with panic. He gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white. I know, Sarah snapped, her hands flying over the controls. Her heart pounded as she tried to think of a way to outmaneuver the massive ship. Emma, can you give me more power? Emma was already at the engine console, her fingers dancing over the controls. I'm trying, but we're at max capacity. If we push it any harder, the engines could blow. Alex, still clutching the glowing orb, stared at the holographic star map that flickered above the terminal. There's something here, he said, his voice filled with urgency. A pattern. The Wanderer isn't just chasing us. It's hurting us. Hurting us where? Sarah asked, her eyes darting between the controls and the view outside. Alex zoomed in on the map, his fingers trembling as he adjusted the display. There's a cluster of asteroids ahead. If we can reach them, we might be able to lose it in the debris field. Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. Hold on, everyone. This is going to get bumpy. The spacecraft shot forward, weaving through the stars as the Wanderer closed the distance. The asteroids loomed ahead, their jagged forms casting long shadows in the dim light. Sarah's hands gripped the controls tightly as she guided the ship into the debris field, the hull groaning as it scraped against the rocks. We're losing it, Jake said, his voice filled with relief as the Wanderer slowed, its massive forms struggling to navigate the tight spaces. But the relief was short-lived. The spacecraft shuddered violently, and the control panel lit up with warning lights. We've got a problem, Emma said, her voice tense. The engines are overheating. If we don't shut them down soon, they're going to blow. Sarah's mind raced as she looked at the asteroids around them. There's a small moon ahead. If we can land there, we might be able to hide until the Wanderer passes. The team worked quickly, guiding the spacecraft toward the moon's surface. The landing was rough, the hull scraping against the rocky ground as the engines sputtered and died. Everyone okay? Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern as she unbuckled her seatbelt. Bruised, but alive, Jake said, rubbing his shoulder. Emma was already at the engine console, her face pale as she studied the damage. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. The engines are fried. Alex, still holding the orb, stared out the window at the stars. We're not safe here. The Wanderer will find us eventually. Sarah's stomach churned as she looked at the orb, its soft glow casting eerie shadows in the cabin. Then we need to figure out what this thing is and why the Wanderer wants it so badly. The team gathered around the terminal, their faces tense as Alex connected the orb and began decoding the data. The holographic star map flickered to life, and a new image appeared. A massive, shadowy entity, its form shifting and swirling like a storm. What is that? Emma asked, her voice filled with awe. Alex's face was pale as he studied the image. It's the prisoner, the thing the Wanderer was built to contain. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to shake, and the spacecraft's alarms blared. Sarah's heart raced as she looked out the window, her breath catching in her throat. The Wanderer was descending toward the moon, its massive form blotting out the stars. The ground beneath the spacecraft shook violently as the Wanderer descended, its massive form blotting out the stars. Sarah's heart pounded as she stared out the window, her mind racing. They were trapped, stranded on a barren moon with a damaged ship and a relentless enemy closing in. "We need to move," Sarah said, her voice sharp with urgency. "If we stay here, we're sitting ducks." "Move where?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with panic. "We're on a moon with no atmosphere and no resources. We can't outrun that thing." Emma was already gathering supplies, her face pale but determined. "We don't have a choice. If we stay here, we're dead. If we move, we might have a chance." Alex, still clutching the glowing orb, stared at the holographic image of the shadowy entity. "There's something here," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "A pattern. The Wanderer isn't just chasing us. It's following this." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she looked at the orb. "You mean it's following you?" Alex nodded, his face pale. "I think so. The orb, it's not just a data core. It's a key, and the Wanderer wants it back." The team worked quickly, gathering what little supplies they could carry and venturing out onto the moon's surface. The airless landscape was barren and desolate, the ground covered in jagged rocks and deep craters. The Wanderer loomed overhead, its massive form casting a long shadow over the moon. "Where are we going?" Jake asked, his voice trembling as he adjusted his oxygen mask. "There," Alex said, pointing to a cluster of rocks in the distance. "If we can get to those rocks, we might be able to hide until the Wanderer passes." The team moved quickly, their boots crunching against the rocky ground as they made their way toward the rocks. The Wanderer's shadow grew larger as it descended, its smooth, silver surface rippling like liquid. "It's coming down," Emma said, her voice sharp with panic. "We need to move faster." The team sprinted toward the rocks, their breaths coming in short gasps as they pushed themselves to their limits. The ground shook violently as the Wanderer landed, its massive form sending shockwaves through the moon's surface. "Get down," Sarah shouted, pulling Jake behind a large rock as the Wanderer's shadow loomed overhead. The team huddled together, their hearts pounding as they waited for the Wanderer to pass. But instead of moving on, the massive ship began to shift, its smooth surface rippling as it transformed into something else entirely. "What is it doing?" Jake whispered, his voice filled with awe. Before anyone could answer, a massive, shadowy figure emerged from the Wanderer's surface, its form shifting and swirling like a storm. "It's the prisoner," Alex said, his voice trembling. The thing the Wanderer was built to contain. The shadowy figure loomed over the moon's surface, its form growing larger and larger as it moved toward the team. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the truth. "It's not just a prisoner," she said, her voice filled with dread. "It's a weapon, and we just set it free." The shadowy entity loomed over the moon's surface, its form shifting and swirling like a storm. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched it, her mind racing. They were trapped, stranded on a barren moon with no way to escape, and a weapon of unimaginable power bearing down on them. "What do we do?" Jake whispered, his voice trembling with fear. Sarah's eyes darted to the glowing orb in Alex's hands. "The key," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "If the Wanderer was built to contain that thing, maybe the key can stop it." Alex's face was pale as he stared at the orb. "I don't know how to use it. The data's fragmented. I can't." Before he could finish, the ground beneath them shook violently, and the shadowy entity let out a deafening roar that echoed through the airless void. The team huddled together, their breaths coming in short gasps as they tried to think of a way to survive. "We need to get back to the spacecraft," Emma said, her voice filled with determination. "If we can get the engines working, we might be able to get out of here." Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. "Jake, Emma, you two head back to the ship. Alex and I will stay here and try to figure out how to use the key." Jake hesitated, his eyes filled with fear. "But what if go?" Sarah shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "We don't have time to argue." Jake and Emma sprinted toward the spacecraft, their boots crunching against the rocky ground as they pushed themselves to their limits. Sarah turned to Alex, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to figure this out. Now." Alex nodded, his fingers trembling as he connected the orb to his portable terminal. The holographic star map flickered to life, and a new image appeared. A massive, glowing structure, its form shifting and swirling like the entity itself. "What is that?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with awe. Alex's eyes widened as he studied the image. "It's a control mechanism. The key, it's not just a key. It's a remote. If we can activate it, we might be able to contain the entity." Before Sarah could respond, the ground shook violently, and a shadowy entity let out another deafening roar. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the truth. "We need to get closer," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "If we can get to the control mechanism, we might be able to stop it." Alex nodded, his face pale but determined. "Let's go." The two of them sprinted toward the glowing structure, their breaths coming in short gasps as they pushed themselves to their limits. The shadowy entity loomed overhead, its form shifting and swirling like a storm as it moved toward them. As they reached the structure, Alex connected the orb to a terminal, his fingers flying over the keys as he tried to activate the control mechanism. The structure flared to life, its glow intensifying as the shadowy entity let out a deafening roar. "It's working!" Alex shouted, his voice filled with excitement. But before they could celebrate, the ground shook violently, and the structure began to collapse. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the truth. "We need to get out of here," she shouted, pulling Alex away from the terminal. The two of them sprinted back toward the spacecraft, their hearts pounding as the shadowy entity loomed overhead.